Howdy, I'm Kat, and on today's chopping block is the fact that media in general has an audience issue, but in this case, I'm focusing on games to bring things into a singular focus. I already know people are going to freak out and ask what I mean by audience problem. Well, what I mean is quite simple. It's that you have multiple markets for games to be launched into. This is commonly broken down into Western and Eastern markets, but you can break it down into national markets, even smaller, into local markets. When I talk about games, it's a broad focus, meaning you're not going anything lower than a national market for analysis. The specific market dictates how games sell or don't sell, grow in fan base, how games are commonly played, and more importantly, changes over time from live sequels or updates. To not take up most of your day, the age-old addiction is coming into the rescue to give me things to use as example. Let's start talking Monster Hunter and how you have a competing audience with Capcom trying to please everyone, but pleasing no one in the end. The year? It's 2004. The console to have is PlayStation 2, and on the console comes a spunky new game called Monster Hunter, with an absolute mess of a control scheme, a gameplay loop that's addictive but time-consuming, and using newly done online networking. Little did people know this game would spawn a line of games going strong for now 21 years. Now enter the year 2018 with Monster Hunter Worlds and the eventual DLC Iceborne. Calling this game and its eventual DLC a third-person beat-em-up, slice-em-up, carve-em-up, drink-em-up, kill-them-all simulator would be accurate with all 14 mainline weapons, including a newly revamped bowgun customization method. The hunting was never better, according to Eastern and Western audiences of the franchise. But like everything that is good, there's always its opposite. Enter the Handler. The bane of the Western audience, but the ever-living joy of the Eastern audience. When I say ever-living joy, I mean the top 10 of the Japanese gaming magazine popularity polls nearly every time. This single character somehow divided the fan base of an entire franchise by just existing. The comical part is the Western audience has localization to blame for the English and other Western European versions being absolute garbage. Monster Hunter Worlds, like most games, are not direct one-to-one translations and have subject to change character details based on region that is being localized. The Handler was given one of the worst treatments of this, as the original Japanese contained more details on the actions, the job, and the overall role the Handler as a character played to the story, both in the foreground and the background. The English and Western European translations also skipped over the fact that you as a hunter don't have any information about the new world, and all the information you obtain comes directly from the Handler, both in and out of the field. This is shown a metric ton better in the Japanese version of the game, where the mid-combat dialogue, if you're having a difficult time with a monster, the Handler chimes in giving tips on how to fight the monster based on her observation from a distance. Meanwhile, in all other versions, just a half-hearted attempt that you can do this motivational speech is given. Additionally, the Japanese version of the Handler had a far less forced tone of voice when speaking that gave a more natural tone using expressive language. If you have played Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth games, you automatically know what I mean by she has the same issue Kampa has for her English versus Japanese voiceovers. It's very apparent with the language barrier in the subjective to change character traits that occurred within the localization process. After the Monster Hunter success that was Monster Hunter Worlds and Iceborne, people never thought it would turn the way it did, but in the end the people got Monster Hunter Rise and the eventual DLC Sunbreak. To say it's a change from Worlds is an understatement. The reason for this level of difference is pretty simply yet kind of complicated, so again I need to explain the console market and how the console market is vastly different in the East compared to the West. Starting from the top, in the West, the console market is largely bound to home-based systems such as Xbox or PlayStation, when a handheld has any level of success, those handhelds tend to have backing from overseas sales such as Nintendo DS or 3DS did, while the PS Vita and the PSP did not have a large enough backing overseas to prop it up long enough for it to eventually succeed in the Western market. The reason you have such prominence of home-based consoles is largely due to the work of Henry Ford and the 40-hour work week he promoted promoted to have time to relax and give free time for things like hobbies, while in Japan, as example, the average work week is well over 40 hours when you start counting in things like overtime and after-work functions like dinners, meetings, or events, resulting in market-wise, they don't have time to sit down and just play a home console, while in the West, we do. Now, if you contrast this to the East and how the console market sits there, the market is so different, it's kind of comical. To start, most home consoles don't sell in the Eastern countries, even if it's the home origin, such as the PlayStation, because of your average work weeks when taking into account all factors in tandem with that most cultures in the East are far more mobile, meaning you are spending very little time at home due to things like work, after-work functions, schooling, after-school functions for students, resulting in most people having 70 to 80 hours of their week just to handle matters of professional life. After 70 to 80 hours a week, you don't have much time left for most things because you still need to sleep and do more important personal matters as well. This results in consoles leaning far more on handhelds like the Game Boy, the Nintendo DS, PlayStation Portable or Vita, and Nintendo Switch. Funny enough, the easiest way to describe the differences between both markets is the Nintendo Switch or Steam Deck. In the East, they are viewed as handheld consoles, which you can attach to a television when you're finally done with your day if you still want to play a game before you go to bed, while in the West, it's seen as a home console you can take on the go if need be. Fundamentally, it's the same exact object, but in execution, the entire premise it serves is vastly different, as one culture is far more on the go with little time to personal hobbies or fun, while the other has ample time for personal hobbies and fun. Why I need to explain this is the fact that Monster Hunter Rise was made for particularly Eastern markets, always on the go, needing to pick up and put down the game at random moments, only having 20 minutes on the train to do a hunt. Things like this never became the norm in the West because of having more free time, while in the East, this is the norm, and when you start playing Monster Hunter Rise like this, it begins to feel like a normal Monster Hunter game of the portable days. Monster Hunter Rise as a game caused a massive stink with the Western audience, not because it was a Switch exclusive, but because it played not like Worlds, which the Western audience largely favored, while of the 5th generation games, Rise was the more favored in the East because it was easier on the go. To say Rise picked an audience that favored the East while Worlds picked an audience that favored the West with how the game played is rather apt. The action of having to pick and choose between audience is why not just Monster Hunter, but games as a whole will always have an issue with split audience is quite real, because at the end of the day, you can't please everyone. When you take into consideration the faults brought up in the first section with translation and localization issues, you begin to see the bigger picture as well, and I don't think I need to connect the dots for you because it's quite clear with how everything brought up is how you ended up with Monster Hunter Wilds. The game of Monster Hunter Wilds, when you get down to it, it feels like a combination of the good and some of the bad from Monster Hunter 5th generation, giving what can best be described as Capcom's attempt at pleasing both the always-on-the-go audience of the East and the more at-home audience of the West through the sheer powerhouse that made it all possible, known as the Steam Deck, and the subsequent larger portable gaming PC market that quickly arose. I have not much else to say on this topic, so I've been Kat, and if you have anything else you want to see, talked about, or just covered in general, leave it down below. Stay safe, and God bless.